For years, Elizabeth Holmes was one of the most celebrated entrepreneurs in America. Politicians admired her, investors trusted her, the media couldn't get enough of her. She appeared on magazine covers, shared stages with world leaders, and built a company valued at an astonishing $9 billion. According to the story she told the world, she was about to revolutionize healthcare forever. All it would take was a tiny blood sample. No more multiple vials, no more waiting days for results, no more expensive laboratory testing. It sounded incredible. It sounded revolutionary. It sounded like the future. There was just one problem. The technology couldn't deliver what Theranos had promised. Despite years of claims and hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, Theranos never demonstrated that its technology could reliably perform the wide range of blood tests it claimed. Which raises a question that's still difficult to answer today. How did so many smart people buy into the story? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning, long before the billion-dollar valuation, long before the headlines, long before Theranos became one of the biggest corporate scandals in modern history. There was a teenager who believed she was destined to change the world. Elizabeth Holmes grew up in Washington, D.C. From an early age, she showed a strong interest in science, technology, and entrepreneurship. While most teenagers were still figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives, Holmes seemed convinced she already knew. She wanted to build something important, something ambitious, something that could change the world. By the time she enrolled at Stanford University, she was already deeply interested in business and innovation. And Stanford wasn't just any university. It sat in the heart of Silicon Valley, a place where startup founders became legends, where billion-dollar companies were born, and where big ideas could attract enormous amounts of money. Then came the idea that would change her life forever. Holmes believed traditional blood testing was slow, expensive, and overdue for innovation. She became convinced there had to be a better way. What if a tiny blood sample could be used to perform a wide range of medical tests? It was an extraordinary idea. If it worked, it could transform healthcare. Patients could receive faster results, doctors could make quicker decisions, and testing could become more accessible. But having an idea and making it work are two very different things. Most people would have spent years proving the science, years building and validating the technology, years demonstrating that it actually worked. Elizabeth Holmes had other plans. At just 19 years old, she left Stanford and founded a company called Theranos. The name combined the words therapy and diagnosis. It sounded scientific, professional, innovative. Exactly the kind of company Silicon Valley loves. And almost immediately, people started paying attention. Investors listened, journalists listened, business leaders listened. The more Holmes spoke about changing healthcare, the more people wanted to believe her. The vision was powerful, the mission was compelling, and before long, millions of dollars started flowing into Theranos. But here's the thing. At this point, very few people had independently verified the technology, and almost nobody was asking the difficult questions, because everyone was focused on the promise, not the proof. At this point, Elizabeth Holmes had something incredibly powerful. Not proof, not a fully validated technology, belief. And belief can be worth billions, because once people started believing in Elizabeth Holmes, everything seemed to happen at once. Investors wanted meetings, journalists wanted interviews, business leaders wanted introductions, and the media couldn't get enough of her. The comparisons to Steve Jobs became increasingly common. The black turtleneck, the intense focus, the ambition to change the world. To many people, Holmes didn't just look like a successful entrepreneur. She looked like a visionary. And that's where things started becoming dangerous. Because the bigger her reputation became, the less people seemed interested in asking difficult questions. Think about that for a second. This was a company claiming it could transform blood testing, a technology that could potentially affect millions of lives. Yet very few people were demanding independent proof. Instead, they were investing, and the money started pouring in. Millions became tens of millions. Tens of millions became hundreds of millions. Many investors were investing because they believed the story Theranos was telling. A young founder, a world-changing mission, a breakthrough technology. It had all the ingredients investors dream about. Soon, Theranos wasn't just another startup. It was one of Silicon Valley's hottest companies. Its valuation kept climbing. $1 billion, $3 billion, $5 billion. Eventually, $9 billion. $9 billion. For a company whose core technology had not been widely validated by independent experts. Looking back now, that should have raised questions. At the time, it mostly raised excitement. And the higher Theranos climbed, the harder it became for people to imagine it falling. Looking back now, it sounds unbelievable. But at the time, people genuinely believed they were watching the future of healthcare unfold. Theranos wasn't just attracting investors, it was attracting influence. Some of the most respected names in American politics and business became associated with the company. Former secretaries of state, military leaders, high-profile public figures, the sort of people whose involvement immediately makes others feel comfortable. Because when enough important people believe something, everyone else assumes somebody must have done the homework, somebody must have checked the facts, somebody must know the technology works. The problem? Very few people had independently verified the company's most important claims. And yet the momentum kept growing. Then came one of the biggest moments in Theranos' history. A partnership with Walgreens, one of the largest pharmacy chains in the United States. This was huge. Suddenly, Theranos wasn't just talking about changing healthcare. It was placing testing centers inside real stores, real customers, real patients, real lives. From the outside, the company looked unstoppable. Investors were celebrating. The media was celebrating. And Elizabeth Holmes was becoming one of the most famous entrepreneurs in America. Everything seemed to be going exactly according to plan. But behind closed doors, a very different story was unfolding. Because while the public was celebrating the future of medicine, some employees were becoming increasingly concerned about what they were seeing. Internal concerns suggested the technology was struggling to perform as advertised. Tests weren't always producing consistent results. Technical problems continued appearing, and employees were beginning to ask difficult questions. Questions that didn't have easy answers. The deeper some employees looked, the more concerned they became. And instead of becoming easier to explain, the problems appeared to be growing. Yet publicly, nothing changed. The headlines remained positive. The interviews continued. The valuation remained enormous. The story being told to the world remained the same. But inside Theranos, a growing number of people were starting to wonder whether that story matched reality. And that's when things started becoming dangerous. Because once people begin asking questions, it's much harder to control the answers. The question was no longer whether there were problems. The question was how long those problems could remain hidden. For years, Theranos had been selling a vision, a future where a tiny blood sample could transform healthcare. Investors believed it. Patients believed it. The media believed it. But inside the company, a very different reality was beginning to emerge. Because while Elizabeth Holmes was appearing on magazine covers, employees were seeing something nobody outside the company could see. The technology wasn't performing the way many people expected. Internal concerns were becoming harder to ignore. At first, the problems seemed isolated. A failed test here, an inconsistent result there. The sort of issues you might expect from a young company developing complex technology. But as time passed, the concerns didn't disappear. They multiplied. Some employees began noticing a pattern. Technical problems kept appearing. results weren't always consistent. And confidence inside parts of the company was beginning to erode. Now think about that for a second. We're not talking about a social media app crashing. We're not talking about a website going offline. We're talking about medical information. Information people trust when making decisions about their health. And the deeper some employees looked, the more concerned they became. But there was another problem. Talking openly about those concerns wasn't always encouraged. Former employees would later describe a culture built around secrecy. Departments were separated from one another. Information was tightly controlled. People often knew only what they needed to know, and those asking too many questions could quickly find themselves under pressure. The company that publicly promoted innovation and transparency was becoming increasingly protective of its secrets, and the stakes were enormous. By now, Theranos wasn't just a startup. It was a company valued in the billions, a company backed by powerful investors, a company whose reputation depended on maintaining the belief that everything was working. Because once enough money is involved, the pressure to protect the story can become overwhelming, even when the facts become harder to ignore. And inside Theranos, more people were beginning to realize something important. The gap between what was being promised and what was actually happening appeared to be getting wider. The question was no longer whether there were concerns. The question was who would be willing to speak up. And for some employees, that decision was getting closer every day. Then came one of the most important people in the entire story. Tyler Schultz, the grandson of former U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz. George Shultz wasn't just an influential supporter of Theranos. He was one of its biggest believers, which made what happened next even more remarkable. Tyler joined Theranos because he believed in the mission. Like many employees, he wanted the company to succeed. He wanted the technology to work. But once he got inside, he started noticing things that didn't make sense. Data that raised questions, results that seemed difficult to explain, claims that appeared increasingly difficult to reconcile with what some employees were seeing internally. The more he looked, the more concerned he became, and eventually, he did something Theranos didn't want people doing. He started asking questions, real questions, the kind of questions that require real answers. But answers were difficult to find. Instead, concerns were often dismissed, problems were downplayed, and the pressure to stop asking questions began to grow. Because by now, Theranos wasn't just a startup. It was a company valued at billions of dollars, a company backed by powerful investors, a company whose reputation depended on maintaining confidence. And when billions of dollars are at stake, people can become highly motivated to protect the story, even when the facts become uncomfortable. As Tyler's concerns grew, so did the risks. Speaking up wasn't just difficult, it was frightening. Friends became distant, relationships became strained, lawyers became involved, and the pressure to stay quiet intensified. Looking back now, it's easy to imagine whistleblowers as fearless heroes. But that's not how it feels when you're living through it. Most people don't wake up planning to expose a billion-dollar company. Most people simply want to do their jobs, avoid conflict, and move on with their lives. Which is exactly why corporate scandals can continue for so long. People see problems, but speaking up comes with consequences. And Theranos made those consequences feel very real. Yet, despite the pressure, the concerns refused to disappear. Because the underlying questions weren't going away, the technology still faced serious concerns. Employees were still raising doubts. And eventually, the story began reaching people outside the company, including one journalist who would change everything. His name was John Carreyrou, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. At first, he had no idea he was about to uncover one of the biggest corporate scandals in modern history. He was simply following leads, asking questions, doing what good journalists do. But the more people he spoke to, the more troubling the picture became. Former employees started talking, documents started appearing, stories started lining up, and for the first time, the carefully controlled narrative Theranos had spent years building was beginning to crack. Because once the truth starts leaking out, it's almost impossible to force it back in. For years, Theranos had controlled the story. Now someone else was about to tell it. And that story would destroy everything. 2015, that story finally became public. The Wall Street Journal published John Carreyrou's investigation, and suddenly, everything changed. For the first time, people weren't hearing Elizabeth Holmes's version of events. They were hearing another side of the story. A story filled with questions. Questions about the technology. Questions about the testing process. Questions about whether Theranos could actually do what it had claimed. The reaction was immediate. Theranos denied the allegations. The company defended its technology. Lawyers became involved. Public statements were issued. And Elizabeth Holmes continued insisting that Theranos was changing healthcare. But there was a problem. The questions weren't going away. And neither was the evidence. Because once scrutiny begins, people start looking closer. Regulators started looking closer. Government agencies started looking closer. Former employees started speaking more openly. And the deeper investigators dug, the more serious the concerns appeared to become. Inspections revealed significant issues. Laboratories failed to meet required standards. Processes came under increasing scrutiny. And the gap between what Theranos had promised and what it could demonstrate was becoming impossible to ignore. Then came one of the biggest blows of all. Theranos invalidated thousands of blood test results. Thousands. Just think about that for a second. Patients had trusted those results. Doctors had relied on those results. And now, serious questions were being raised about their reliability. At that point, the illusion was beginning to crack. Fast. Investors were becoming nervous. Partners were becoming cautious. And the company that once looked unstoppable suddenly looked vulnerable. For years, Theranos had been powered by belief. Now that belief was beginning to disappear. And once confidence starts collapsing, it becomes incredibly difficult to stop. The question was no longer whether Theranos could change healthcare. The question was whether Theranos could survive at all. Investors began losing confidence. Partners began distancing themselves. The media coverage turned hostile. And the company that once looked unstoppable was now fighting for survival. The valuation that had once reached $9 billion began collapsing. Employees left. Projects were canceled. Facilities were shut down. The dream that had captivated Silicon Valley was falling apart in real time. For years, Theranos had promised to transform healthcare. Now it was struggling to survive. But survival wasn't enough, because by 2018, it was over. Theranos officially dissolved. The company no longer existed. Years of hype, years of headlines, years of promises, gone. Just like that. But the story wasn't finished. Because while Theranos had collapsed, questions still remained. Who knew what? When did they know it? And how much of it had been intentional? Those questions would eventually lead to criminal charges. And years later, Elizabeth Holmes found herself somewhere few people could have imagined during the height of Theranos. Not on a magazine cover, not on a conference stage, not standing beside world leaders, but sitting in a courtroom. The woman once celebrated as the next Steve Jobs was now fighting for her freedom. The trial attracted worldwide attention. Witnesses testified. Evidence was presented. Former employees spoke openly about what they had seen. And the image Theranos had spent years carefully building continued to crumble. Then came the verdict. Elizabeth Holmes was convicted on multiple counts of fraud. One of Silicon Valley's most celebrated founders had become one of its most infamous. And that's where most people think the story ends. But it doesn't. Because the real story isn't about Elizabeth Holmes. It's about belief. Theranos didn't become a $9 billion company because its most important claims had been independently verified. It became a $9 billion company because investors, partners, and supporters believed the vision being presented to them. The story was exciting, the mission was compelling, and the promise was irresistible. A tiny blood sample, faster testing, a revolution in healthcare. People wanted it to be true. And when people want something to be true, badly enough, they sometimes stop asking difficult questions. Or worse, they assume somebody else already has. And that's what makes Theranos so fascinating. Not because one person told a story, but because so many intelligent people accepted it. Investors, politicians, business leaders, journalists, all looking at the same company, all seeing what they hoped was there, instead of what could actually be proven. $9 billion, thousands of employees, years of praise, years of headlines, gone. The story of Theranos wasn't just a failure of technology. It was a failure of skepticism. A reminder that confidence can be mistaken for competence. Charisma can be mistaken for truth. And sometimes, the most dangerous lies are the ones people desperately want to believe. Every failure leaves clues. The question is whether anyone notices them in time.